It's Podathon week on the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. And for 5 big days in a row, we're bringing you special episodes that put the fun in fundraising, including the week's planetary news, a closer look at the moon, and special Podathon surprises. Plus, your chance to win prizes, people. So many prizes. And now, here's your host, astrologer and author, April Elliott Kent.
Hello, invisible friend. April here. And the date today is September 5th, 2025. Welcome to episode 310 of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast and the final day of the 6th annual Big Sky Astrology Podathon. Each year during Labor Day week, I bring you 5 daily episodes, complete with the big astrological news of the week. And this year, interviews with 5 amazing astrologers from different astrological specialties. This is also the week when I make my annual appeal for donations, which help me cover the cost of producing the podcast for the full year ahead. There are costs associated with producing this weekly show, and I would rather turn to my listeners to help me cover those costs than to take on advertising. And so once a year, during Labor Day week, I give you Podathon. And then the rest of the year, I don't really need to be talking about fundraising. How can you help? You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become a regular monthly contributor. Just go to bigskyastropod.com. And to encourage your contributions, here are this year's fantastic giveaways. First, everyone who donates $25 or more, as well as my ongoing monthly PodPal contributors, will be entered in a drawing for a chance to win one of these prizes. One grand prize winner will win a 90-minute reading with me, a $275 value. 2 lucky donors will win a 60-minute personal astrology reading with me. That's a $215 value. And 3 lucky donors will win a copy of my Followed by a Moon Shadow Eclipse report, a $35 value, and that will help you get ready for this month's eclipses. To be entered in the drawing, you need to make your $25 donation at bigskyastropod.com no later than 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time on Monday, September 8th. The drawing will be held on September 9th, and winners will be notified by email. But if you can't donate that much, I'm also offering donors of only $10 or more a special bonus, a series of private YouTube videos for donors only. Over the past year, I've been meeting with donors online for most new moons, going in depth into big planetary transits and the new moon's symbolism. And if even that is out of reach, here are a few free, easy ways you can show your love and support for the podcast. Please subscribe or follow the show on your app of choice. This is the very best way to help the show get noticed by new listeners. You could leave a 5-star rating or write a review on Apple Podcasts or any of the other platforms that allow comments. These can inspire others to sample the show. And finally, recommend the show to an astrology-loving friend. However you choose to show your appreciation, please know that I am deeply grateful for your support. And now for today's episode. In this week's special daily episodes, I've been covering the week's major astrological news and sharing an interview with a fellow astrologer, each practicing in a particular astrological specialty. psychological astrology, Vedic, Hellenistic, evolutionary. And today, my final interview in this series is with Ronnie Gale Dreyer, talking about one of her astrological specialties, astrocartography. But first, let's take a look at today's planetary news. Uranus turns retrograde today at 9:51 p.m. Pacific Time at 1 degree 27 minutes Gemini. It will turn direct again on February 3rd, 2026. Uranus is the planet of liberty, unpredictability, rebellion, and a transiting planet that's retrograde sometimes appears to behave contrary to its usual mode. In the case of Uranus, that may mean seeming to toe the line and go along with the status quo. But the key phrase here is seeming to, because retrograde motion is an optical illusion, and so is this reversal of character. When a planet is retrograde, we focus its power inward, looking for our own guidance in its matters. What are the rules that govern our inner life, and which of them do we feel need to be broken? By the time Uranus turns direct again, on February 3rd, 2026, it will have retrograded all the way back into late Taurus. It does that on November 6th. In the months ahead, ask yourself, what are you willing to give up or put up with to maintain your sense of freedom? You'll be much clearer about that by the time Uranus turns direct in the new year. There's also a void of course moon period that begins today at 1:51 p.m. Pacific Time, when the moon in Aquarius trines Mars in Libra. It's void of course for 19 hours and 3 minutes before it enters Pisces tomorrow, September 6th at 8:54 a.m. and gets ready for its big lunar eclipse. A trine aspect from the moon to Mars can be very energizing, very motivating, and get us moving on doing what needs to be done. And since the moon is in Aquarius and Mars is in Libra, this applies especially to any kind of social commitments. And looking ahead to Sunday, September 7th, the full moon in Pisces at 11:08 a.m. Pacific Time is a total lunar eclipse at 15 degrees 22 minutes Pisces. Now, any full moon reveals what is and isn't working in our lives. It's the time of the moon's greatest illumination, and we notice a lot of things that we normally don't. But this one is an eclipse. An eclipse represents a crisis or a turning point, and lunar eclipses in particular are important for relationships, and we will often see turns in the road, relationships beginning, getting to a new level, or even ending. A Pisces full moon and eclipse asks us to cultivate an environment of empathy and flexibility. This is a time we're kind of taking a fresh look back at that first of 2 Virgo new moons on August 22nd and preparing for any changes that may be coming our way at the September 21st Virgo new moon solar eclipse. The Sabian symbol for this eclipse point is 16 Pisces, the flow of inspiration, which certainly sounds very apropos for Pisces. And the sun is on 16 Virgo and orangutan. Together, these symbols suggest something about letting our inspiration be inspired by wildness and a lack of refinement. Eclipses near this same point included a solar eclipse back on March 9th, 2016, a lunar eclipse on September 7th, 2006, a lunar eclipse on September 6th, 1998, and a solar eclipse on March 9th, 1997, all within just a few degrees of this lunar eclipse point. So since the same areas of your chart are being impacted by this eclipse, it's worth looking back to these previous years to see if something that was important in your life then is connected in some way to what's happening for you now. If you would like a little help figuring that all out, you can order my Moon Shadow Eclipse Report. It covers the years 2025 through 2027 and shows where all of the eclipses are falling in your birth chart, the aspects they're making to your natal planets, and most importantly, all of the previous years in these cycles. You can order the report at eclipseastrology.com. My final Podathon interview today is with Ronnie Gale Dreyer, who's sharing an overview of astrocartography, which is a subject I've gotten many listener questions about. I hope you enjoy our conversation. My guest today is Ronnie Gale Dreyer, and she is an internationally known consultant, author, and teacher, specializing in both Western and Indian astrology. Based in New York City, she has clients and students throughout the world. She lectures and teaches extensively for astrology groups and conferences, and she is a certified astrocartography practitioner. Ronnie has written numerous books, including Venus and Vedic astrology, articles, and columns. She holds an MA in South Asian languages from Columbia University. Ronnie is here with us today to talk about astrocartography, which is a subject I know many of my listeners are fascinated by. Ronnie, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to talking about astrocartography.
Yay! Well, then you're the right person for this particular interview. What is astrocartography and how does it add a new or different perspective to a natal chart?
Okay, well, astrocartography itself is a trademark term that Jim Lewis, an astrologer who kind of invented and promoted this technique in the 1970s, he trademarked it to combine the whole idea of locational astrology with astrology. And he did not invent it, but he kind of made it into a product, into a map, a beautiful visual map. And you will know astrocartography sometimes as astrolocality or astromapping. And really, very simply, what it is it shows you where the planets are angular around the world at an exact moment in time. So let's say I'm in New York, and it's, whatever time it is, let's say 3 p.m, and you are in California, which would be at 12 p.m. So I would then take that map, take that chart, and I would then draw it up. If it was my map, let's say it's 3 o'clock, I would move it to make it 12 o'clock in California. So what it would mean is that the planets would all be exactly the same because we're just looking at the planetary degrees all around the world, but the angles are going to be different. The ascendant is going to be different. The midheaven is going to be different because the sun is going to rise, let's say, 3 hours earlier. So that's really what it means. It just shows you different places in the world where, let's say, your planets are angular. And you can do this just by relocating your chart in any software, and that would give you a whole new chart. Now, the planets are the same, but again, it would show you a new ascendant, a new midheaven, which means your planets would be in different houses. And so they give you a different kind of relationship to place. And what the map did specifically with what's called astrocartography is it really worked with the angles. And it was the whole idea or concept that, if you know Michel Gauquelin, he was a French astrologer who talked about planets on the angles and how important they are. And if you look at planets that are connected with your angles, with your midheaven, IC, ascendant, descendant, they're going to be very prominent in your life. They're going to be very important. And that's really the basis of astrophotography. Again, you can look at the whole chart in a different place, and you can then, examine everything, the houses and how they relate to the new angles. So that's really all it is. It's just looking at your chart at the same exact moment in time, but in a different place.
And it's such a nice, elegant map that he created, because instead of having to go hunt and peck around the world to figure out where you could cast a chart to get the sun on the midheaven, for example.
Right.
In this map, it's very obvious. So when somebody looks at their astrocartography map, they will see all of these planetary lines that are crossing the globe. Can you just give us a way of thinking about what those lines actually represent?
Yeah. So when you first look at a map, it can be very daunting. And you can, it used to be many, many years ago, you had to buy the map. Now, of course, it's in every software program. You can even go to astro.com and do it for free. But if you look at the whole map of the world, it's daunting because you're going to have, let's say, the sun on the midheaven, IC, ascendant, descendant, in different places all around the world. So that's 4 options. Then you get 4 options for the moon, Mercury, etc. So the best thing to do always is kind of isolate it. So you can look at your map for the United States or for North America, for South America, for Europe, for Asia. And then what you do is that when you look at it and you see where that line is, you can kind of follow it and say, okay, let's say Venus was on the midheaven in a different city. And what you would see is you would see like a vertical line going up and down for the midheaven IC. But what you would see, let's say for the ascendant and descendant, is you see a curving line because the sun rises and sets. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So it becomes very curving. And when you look at those, it just simply means that for 2 things. You can, like you do with a horoscope, you can look at a planet generically. You can say, oh, well, let's see, where is Venus? Let me see if that's where I'm going to find love. But it's not that simple. So that's why people have to then think a little bit harder. It might be a place where you're creative or you experience Venus, you experience, let's say, the whole idea of love. The funny thing is, when I got into astrocartography, I had traveled a lot and I looked back on where I'd been. And the interesting thing was I went to the University of New Mexico. And when I looked at the map, for instance, Venus was on my midheaven in Albuquerque, which is where the University of New Mexico is. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I studied drama. I was the theater major. And that was like years later that I saw that. But what it really meant was that if I changed my particular chart from being born in New York City to being born in Albuquerque, the angles changed so that Venus would be on the midheaven of my chart in Albuquerque, but 2 hours earlier because, the difference in time. So every planet is going to have a generic meaning. Let's say if you go to a Jupiter line, you might get opportunities. You might expand your horizons. You might learn. Mercury, you might find that you're doing different things, not just one thing. Again, it might be media work, or it might just be that you have 2 different interests. Saturn would be a line that you have to, be more structured, and maybe you'd have to give up something. So it might mean that you're not going to be as doing a million things, but you have to focus on one thing. But the key really and that's very general. So the key though would be to then relate it back to your natal chart. And this is what I always tell people when I teach. I say, well, you might want to go to your Venus line for love, but what if you have Venus conjunct Mars, where Saturn, Pluto? What if you have a really intense, difficult Venus? You might not want to go to your Venus line. You might want to avoid it.
Your Venus is a special case.
So, but it gives you opportunities in different areas. And it just makes those planets more prominent. The energy of the planet, but also what it does in your natal chart. You always have to go back to your natal chart. What is your planet doing? What house is it in? What house does it rule? What aspects does it have? And, then it gets more complicated because you might have, Venus in a quadrant that doesn't have any aspects to it. So it's like a singleton. And then you'd say, well, maybe I don't want to go there because it's going to give me more of a lonely life rather than a life of love and connection. Every planet, sometimes you can have a Mars line and be more accident prone. I've seen that happen. But then if you're aware of it, you might be more careful. So it's like anything else in the birth chart. It just makes certain planets in different places more obvious. You know what I'm saying? The energy is more palpable, and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to just look, quickly at your, map, and then you can get like more into it. You really look more deeply.
And what you said so important. I was speaking to an astrologer about a month ago that does a lot of astrolocality, and he said what people don't understand when they're asking about astrocartography is we're not just looking at astrocartography, we're looking at your chart. So it really is. And it's, as you say, if you have a high profile, especially it seems a conjunction, a square, or an opposition in your chart, then going to those angular places is obviously going to bring that whole configuration to the forefront and all angular.
That's what it does. So, like if you do astrocartography for a client or, yourself or your family member or whatever, you really have to know your chart. You can look at it as you can look at it as an exercise in just saying, oh, my Mars line is here, my Uranus line is here. But you then really want to know what they mean in your natal chart in order to combine the natal chart with the location. So that's really, really important.
Another astrologer, I think it was Susie Cox, I heard talking about it. And she said that she starts out by just asking people, where have you been? How did it feel?
Right.
Because then you get so much of a feeling of how that generic planet acts out once it's on an angle.
Right. I did an astrocartography reading for a client that I had seen for many years, so I know her pretty well. And she kept telling me about this one place that she really wanted to go to. And, I was looking at the map and I said, okay, that place has a little bit of a complication simply because it puts a lot of planets on angles. So it's intense. I said, I wouldn't tell you not to go to a place because it's intense. I would just say to you, make sure you know that you're going to have that. And some people are not steered away from a place just because it has challenges. The life is full of challenges. But what I do say to people, exactly what Susie says, I said, always visit a place first, spend a little time there if you're going to move there. I mean, it doesn't always mean if you have an astrocartography map or you want to learn about it that you're going to move to a place. You can do business with somebody who is living in a place. It doesn't have to be that you're physically in that place, but it might mean you have a connection with that place. But if you do want to move there, we say you have to go there, see how it feels viscerally, because, the astrocartography map, it's on paper. It's like anything else. I mean, ideally, or in theory, you might have this planet on an angle in your chart in a certain place, but you have to experience how it really feels.
I think I told you in an email that I sent you that I found so much over the years that when people are getting a lot of hard transits, for example, to a planet in their chart, and they're talking about moving, and I'll look at that place. It is a place where they have a strong astrocartography line. It's almost as if they have to go to that place to really work through that transit. Are there questions that an astrocartography chart can help a person answer? Or is it really just useful for deciding where to move or where to travel?
Oh, not at all. I mean, like I said, there are many connections, especially now that we live in such a global world with the internet. As I was saying to you earlier, it's become so popular because we're in touch with people all over the place. I mean, I remember, like when I was a kid, we would have what's called pen pals. And I don't know if you had pen pals and you would.
I did.
Right?
I did. Yes.
And it was the only way you could communicate. So you had a pen pal and school provided a list and, you could pick a country. Let's say you wanted to, have a pen pal in Japan. You wrote a letter, which took weeks to get there. And then that person would write you a letter back and you were pen pals. Now, of course, all you have to do is send a text, send an email. The world has become so much closer. So the options for astrocartography are enormous. You don't have to move to a place. Like I was saying before, you might want to do business in a place, and that business might have its location or headquarters in a certain place. Or you might want to do business with somebody and they're the president of a company, or they live in a certain place. You might even have a relationship with somebody and you might find that they're from a different place. And so that would be interesting. I had a client a few months ago and we were looking at the map and I was showing him his Venus line. It just so happens it was Venus and it went through a certain town in India. He was Indian and he said, wow, that's where my wife is from. So they were living in California, but his wife was born and raised in the place where his Venus line went through. So
Right.
it was fascinating. And you can do connections with a place. You can also travel. I know a lot of times people, when they want to take vacations, they have options and they might look at the astrocartography map and say, well, which is a better place? And again, it's timing also. Where are your transits? I mean, if you have a difficult transit to a planet, you might be compelled to go to that place, or you might want to keep away from it. It's the same thing, but it's definitely, I think difficult transits kind of compel you to move and take action and do things. And that's like what my talk at UAC, for instance, is going to be about.
That's what I thought when I saw the title. I thought, ooh, good.
Yeah. And Jim Lewis, I mean, of course, he was a businessman too. He was a great astrologer, but he was a businessman. He developed a technique that he trademarked also called cyclocartography. And it had to do with progressions and transit to the planet when you wanted to make a move or at this particular time. And it shows you, of course, if you had a planet in a certain place or even in your birth chart, of course, you look at the progression and transit and it might emphasize that place. I mean, now they also have what's called remote activation. And this has become, it's interesting, it's become a kind of catchphrase in some of the courses that people are teaching about astrocartography. And it has to do with, let's say you have a Jupiter line and you have a nice Jupiter in your chart and you want the opportunities and some expansion and luck, but you're not even near a Jupiter line. And anywhere that you might move, Jupiter is not going to be angular. But let's say you have Jupiter angular in Italy, for instance, and you want to activate that Jupiter. You would maybe listen to opera or, eat Italian food or something that puts you in touch with that place without being there. And even with the internet, it becomes easy to sort of make connections with a place and see what's happening. Maybe, a film that was made in a certain place. I had a client a few months ago. And again, I don't really tell people what to do particularly. I'll give them different options because one part of astrology, it's not the whole answer. And I think what's very important also is, and at least it's my point of view, is that you take yourself wherever you go. So when you go to a place, let's say you want to move or do business in a place and you have a particular planet that's going to be strong in the chart, well, that means that that planet will give you a different kind of relationship to that place. It's sort of like if you move anywhere, you know that your relationship to a place is different. You might move to a place that has a dry climate or a muggy climate. You're going to relate to it differently. Maybe the plant life is different. You always know that you're not going to change particularly, but different places might bring certain things out in you because you might be able to express them better in that particular place. So that's, I think, important to remember. You still are who you are, but you might be able to tap into something that easier, in a certain place. So that goes with travel. It goes with work. Also colleges. I had a friend, her daughter made a lot of different colleges and she wanted me to look at the astrocartography map for each of the locations where the universities were. And that was kind of interesting to see, how it would relate to that. Really use it for a lot of different purposes, not just making the move to change your life and have a permanent move anywhere.
I remember working with one client who was a writer and had a manuscript that they wanted to submit. And they had a choice of a few different publishing houses. And so we could look at where that publishing house was based, how their
Right.
chart lined up there. And it was pretty helpful. Well, what is the first step you would recommend for someone who is curious about astrocartography? Do you recommend that people visit their planetary lines in person? Or we talked about that and how you can activate them in other ways. What are the resources that you would point people to?
Well, to learn about astrocartography, there are nowadays so many options. Of course, Jim Lewis, he wrote a book, which my husband, Kenneth Irving, actually edited and completed because Jim passed away. The book is called The Psychology of Astrocartography. It's available everywhere, really, and it's an ebook and it's a print book. And it's based on Jim's writings. They are Jim's writings. And then what Ken did was he just turned it into a book. So you get that. There are a lot of other books that are about locality. Martin Davis has a really wonderful book that was published by Wessex Astrology. And there is a course at Kepler College on astrocartography. And then there are just individual people who give lectures. I mean, I've given webinars, a lot of other people, not just me, but that would be one way to start learning it. And the other way is if you have software, you can look at the mapping function in the software, or you go to astro.com. The one thing I will say that's important is that if you do go to astro.com and use it, make sure you use what's called the in mundo option rather than the diagonal. And the reason I say that is the one thing that's important about the map as opposed to a chart on your software is when you draw a chart, it's two-dimensional. So you're doing latitude and longitude. When you're doing the map, it's three-dimensional. So the map will show you where the planets actually are in the sky. And there are a few planets that could sometimes change in terms of how close they are to an angle. Because you want to get them within a certain orb, like maybe 5 degrees. So that's important. But that's what I would do. I would go to, if you're interested in your chart, I mean, if you don't have software, if you're not using professional software, go to astro.com. It's a wonderful option. And it's really, they have a very good program there, and they'll give you definitions. If you click on a place, it'll tell you the options. Like everything else, take everything with a grain of salt. It might be generally correct, but you always have to go to your chart to do that.
Right.
And that's what I would do. I would really start basically by using your own chart. And yes, I would also look and see where certain planets are and think about it. Now, have I ever lived in that place? Have I known somebody from that place? Have I ever had a connection with that place on some level? And we all in this global world have had connections with people and businesses and movies and things from all over. And that's how you start to think about it. Look at your own map and look at the places and see. And you might come up with some really interesting things when you do that.
Yeah. Just don't look for just Venus and Jupiter if you have aspects to Venus and Jupiter in your birth chart.
Well, look at the sun. I mean, you can look at the sun line, where the sun is. That might be where you have confidence, where you kind of have success, or where you feel confident enough to express yourself, to be ambitious, to seek out opportunity. It's really nice to look at something in a general way, like people look at sun sign astrology. But then if you're more serious about it, it's really good to take another look and really kind of delve into all those aspects of it. I think it's very interesting. Yeah.
Where can people find you, and what do you have coming up in terms of lectures or classes or anything?
Yeah, you can find me at ronniedreyer.com, my website, and I always have, there's the way of getting in touch with me with email through there, or my email is ronniegale.dreyer@gmail.com, but you can just find me through my website. And I teach ongoing classes in Indian astrology, in Vedic astrology a lot. I also do a year ahead webinar. I have a newsletter. You can sign up for my free newsletter online. And actually, I'm going to be giving a talk on astrocartography for OPA, for the Organization of Professional Astrology, in November. So if you're an OPA member, it'll be free. And if you're not an OPA member, I don't think it's going to be very expensive. So that would be a good place to also hear me, but you don't have to only hear me. You can go on YouTube. There's a billion people who are talking about astrocartography.
Is that already up on, do you know if that's already up on OPA's website?
I think so. If you go to,
Oh, we'll find the link. Yeah. And we'll put it in the show description so people can get there and to your website and the link to your book, your husband's book, the astrocartography thing. And
yeah, that would be great.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you at UAC. I'm definitely going to be at your lecture on astrocartography.
Oh, great.
Which sounds like it's right up my alley. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to talk to you and to your audience. I hope it gave everybody a little bit of an introduction to astrocartography.
I had so much fun speaking with Ronnie. And in fact, this whole week of interviews has been such a gift that I've given myself as well as to all of you. I hope that you've enjoyed these conversations as much as I did, and that you will be inspired maybe to investigate some of the astrological specialties that we've heard about this week. If you missed any of the interviews, I hope that you'll backtrack to all the week's episodes and listen to every single one. Well, that is everything on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology podcast, and especially for joining me on the 6th annual Podathon. This weekly podcast is audience funded, and your generous donations have helped me for 6 years keep the podcast coming to you free of ads. To make your donation, please go to bigskyastropod.com. Anyone who donates $10 or more will receive access to a series of private YouTube videos throughout the year. And if you donate $25 or more, you'll automatically be entered in a drawing for a chance to win a 90-minute reading, a 60-minute reading, or one of my moon shadow eclipse reports. As longtime listeners know, I love to thank my financial donors on the air over the next 12 months. If you donate and you do not want me to mention your name, just email me, april@bigskyAstrology.com. This week, we are thanking Nadine Barkley and monthly donor Joe Brocato. Joe and Nadine, thank you so much for listening and for supporting the show with your donations. You are my final donors since last year's Podathon. Thank you. And thanks very much to all of you for dropping in all year long, and especially during this 6th annual Podathon. Please remember to make your donation at bigskyastropod.com. Join me again bright and early next Monday for another episode. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.
That's a wrap for this year's Big Sky Astrology Podathon. Thanks for being with us all week long. And don't forget to make your donation at bigskyastropod.com. Join us next Monday for another episode of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast.